There's a lighthouse on the coast of Florida. Nothing remarkable about it. Old structure, weathered walls. Sits at the edge of a nature reserve the way lighthouses do. Isolated, functional, unremarkable. Except 3 years ago, something hit it. Nobody saw what. A meteorite, maybe. Something that came down from above and made contact with the base of that lighthouse and didn't leave a crater or a burn mark or any of the physical evidence you'd expect from an impact. What it left instead was a shimmer, a translucent, iridescent boundary that appeared in the air around the lighthouse and began, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, expanding outward, like a soap bubble growing, like something breathing. The government called the area inside it Area X, sent teams in to investigate, military units, scientists, trained professionals with equipment and protocols, and every practical resource available. None of them came back. Or one came back. One man. A soldier. He reappeared at home sitting at his kitchen table with no memory of how he got there and no explanation for where he'd been. And within weeks of his return, he was dying from aggressive cancer that seemed to come from everywhere in his body simultaneously. His wife is a biologist named Lena, and she is the reason we're going into the Shimmer today. Alex Garland's 2018 film Annihilation is based on Jeff Vandermeer's novel of the same name, and it is one of the most genuinely strange science fiction films produced in the last decade. Not strange in a chaotic or incoherent way. Strange in the way a dream is strange, internally consistent, emotionally precise, operating on a logic that you can feel even when you can't fully articulate it. It was not a box office success. Paramount reportedly found it too intellectual, too ambiguous, too unwilling to explain itself cleanly. Those are precisely the reasons it deserves your full attention. Lena volunteers for the next expedition into Area X. She's a biology professor, former military, and she is, though the film reveals this slowly and carefully, not a woman who is entirely motivated by saving her husband. Lena has a self-destructive quality she doesn't fully acknowledge, a capacity for damage that the film introduces quietly early and returns to with increasing significance as the story progresses. The expedition team is 5 women. Dr. Ventress, the psychologist who leads the mission and who has her own reasons for going, that she keeps entirely to herself. Anya, the paramedic. Cass, the anthropologist, whose daughter died and who carries that grief like a second body. Josie, the physicist, who is gentler and more observant than anyone else in the group. And Lena. They cross the Shimmer boundary, and immediately something is wrong. Not dramatically wrong, quietly wrong. They lose time. They set up camp for what feels like an evening, and wake up to find days have passed. Their compasses don't work. Radio communication in or out is impossible, and the landscape around them, which should be a standard Florida coastal reserve, is doing things that landscapes don't do. Plants growing in human shapes, flowers that shouldn't exist in this ecosystem blooming from the same root system, trees that have crystallized into glass along the shoreline, delicate and impossible, and genuinely beautiful in a way that makes the wrongness harder to register, because beauty is disarming. The Shimmer isn't destroying things, it's rewriting them. This is where the film starts doing something more interesting than most science fiction attempts. Dr. Ventress explains her theory.
We have many theories, few facts.
The Shimmer is a prism, but instead of refracting light, it refracts everything. DNA, radio waves, thought patterns, memory. everything that enters the Shimmer gets mixed with everything else inside it. Species boundaries collapse. Animal and plant trees intermingle. The distinctions that normally keep things separate, the biological walls between organisms, are dissolving. The Shimmer isn't an invasion, it's a transformation. And the longer you're inside it, the more it transforms you. The expedition begins finding evidence of previous teams, a video recording from a military unit that entered before them, and what that video shows inside the lighthouse makes everyone in the current team go quiet in a way that has nothing to do with tactics or procedure.
So we know what happened to the last group. They went insane.
There was something alive.
It has to do with the dawning understanding that whatever is happening inside Area X is not following any script humanity has prepared for. The creature attacks start, and they are, by any measure, among the most disturbing sequences in recent science fiction cinema. Not because of gore, because of wrongness. There's a bear, or something that used to be a bear. It attacks the camp and takes one of the team members, and when it returns, when it finds the surviving women in the dark, it cries out in its victim's voice, her voice, coming from inside the creature. The last sound she made before she died, somehow absorbed and replicated by whatever the Shimmer has made this animal into. It stands in the dark outside the building, making a dead woman screams, and the film holds on that sound for longer than is comfortable. Because the Shimmer doesn't just change things physically. It absorbs them, keeps something of them. And that detail, that small, terrible detail, is the key to understanding what the lighthouse contains. The team fractures the way isolated people under impossible stress always fracture. Trust collapses. Anya becomes paranoid. The expedition that began with 5 women is down to 2 by the time Lena reaches the lighthouse. Ventress went ahead alone, and Lena follows because by this point, she needs to see what's at the center of all of this with her own eyes. What she finds inside the lighthouse first is a hole in the ground. Below the lighthouse, below the original impact point, a tunnel going down into something that the camera follows with a reluctance that mirrors exactly how you feel watching it. And at the bottom, something that is not from here. Subscribe and hit the bell. This is what we do here every week. Something real, something worth your time. What Lena encounters at the bottom of that tunnel is where Annihilation stops being a science fiction film and becomes something closer to an experience. It's not a creature in any traditional sense. It's not a consciousness that communicates in language. It has no agenda that maps onto anything human. No desire to conquer or destroy or communicate or establish dominance. It simply is. And when it encounters Lena, it does what the Shimmer does to everything. It starts to copy her. A figure made of light that absorbs her movements, her gestures, her shape. Not aggressively, not with malice. The way a mirror absorbs your reflection. The way the Shimmer absorbed the DNA of everything that crossed its boundary. It's not trying to become her. It has no concept of trying. It just reflects, replicates, transforms what it touches into a version of itself that carries traces of what it touched. Lena fights it, and the sequence that follows is one of those genuinely rare moments in science fiction where the imagery on screen is doing something language struggles to fully translate. The figure made of light wearing her movements like a borrowed coat. Lena's attempt to redirect it, to give it something to replicate that leads it somewhere else. The strange, terrible intimacy of being copied by something that has no understanding of what you are. She escapes. She detonates a phosphorus grenade. The lighthouse burns. the Shimmer collapses. And Lena walks out of Area X the way her husband walked out. Alive, apparently intact, carrying something she cannot fully account for. Here is where the film asks its real question. And it's a question it has been building toward since the first frame. In the debriefing room after her return, Lena is asked what she found inside the lighthouse. She answers. She's calm, coherent, every answer correct and detailed. But there is a moment, one small moment, where the interviewer asks if the entity inside the lighthouse was destroying everything it encountered. And Lena says, no, it wasn't destroying. It was changing everything into something else. And then she's asked whether the Lena who came out is the same Lena who went in. She pauses. She says yes, but her eyes in that moment. Her eyes don't say yes. The film's final image is Lena reuniting with the barely alive version of her husband. She holds him, and in the dark, the shimmer, the iridescent, impossible light, moves briefly in her eyes. And in his. Whatever came out of Area X is not entirely Lena. It's carrying Lena the way the shimmer carried everything that passed through it, with traces of the original, with enough similarity to be undetectable in a debriefing room, with enough difference that something fundamental has shifted in a way that may take years to fully surface. The shimmer is gone. But the transformation it started didn't stop at the boundary. Annihilation is a film about self-destruction. Garland has said this in interviews, and the film supports it on every level. Each woman on the expedition was there. In some way, she may not have fully admitted to herself, because some part of her was willing to not come back. Lena's self-destruction is the most explicit. She had an affair that damaged her marriage before her husband ever volunteered for Area X. She carries guilt she hasn't processed. She volunteers for a mission everyone treats as a death sentence. The Shimmer didn't choose these women randomly. It drew the ones who were already in the process of transforming, already in the process of becoming something different from who they were, already carrying the kind of damage that makes a person step toward the unknown rather than away from it. What they found inside wasn't just alien. It was a mirror, showing them the transformation they were already undergoing, just accelerated, just made visible, just taken to its natural conclusion in the space of a few days instead of a lifetime. The lighthouse was never the destination. The looking was. Some films show you something impossible and ask you to be amazed. Annihilation shows you something impossible and asks you to recognize it. That feeling of becoming something you can't quite name, of carrying damage that slowly changes the shape of who you are, of looking in the mirror and seeing something familiar that is also somehow not entirely you anymore. The shimmer is enormous and iridescent and scientifically inexplicable. But the thing it's describing is just the ordinary human experience of change, pushed all the way to its terrifying outer edge and held there until you can't look away. Subscribe and leave the bell on. Next week we go somewhere just as strange and just as worth the time. One question for the comments. Do you think the Lena who walked out was the real Lena? Or something else wearing her face? Drop it below. This community always has the most interesting answers.